Welcome to the Birdhouse Dynasty show, and today we're going to be talking wide receivers. That's right, we're talking the most crowded wide receiver rooms in the NFL. And if you haven't checked out the Netflix special Receivers, I say go check it out. This is what partially inspired this tonight. So, we're going to be talking Niners, Bears, Seahawks, the Chiefs, and the Houston Texans. That's right. The receiver room most talked about this offseason with Stephon Diggs signing trade. And well, we just have a huge increase in the value of CJ Stroud. And so we'll definitely discuss those Texans as well. If you haven't hit the like and subscribe, do that. As well as check out our Patreon. We've got the Birdhouse Dynasty show on Patreon. Just $1 a month to sign up for the chat rooms, $3 a month if you want my rankings, which will be coming out soon. That'll have your redraft, dynasty, best ball rankings for you, getting ready to get geared up for this 2024 season. Yes. So, before I move along, I just want to send our thoughts out to the people of Houston with their power outages. Our guest, normally Matt English, he would be with us, but is unable to be here tonight. Hopefully, later this week, he will check in. That's right when we do our first roster review. That'll be from our Crash and Smash IDP League. We're going to check out one of the rosters in that league. If you do sign up for our Patreon, we will do a free roster review for you. Just give me your sleeper ID and the league of your choice that you'd like us to do a roster review for. The Birdman will be happy to check that out for you, let you know what my thoughts are on your roster. Now let's get to those wide receiver rooms. We'll start off with the Green Bay Packers. That's right. Jordan Love commanding the ship there. Had a great breakout last half of the 2023 season. And of course, we all know that this receiver room is stacked with young talent. Yes, he's got his wide receiver one in Christian Watson, the exciting Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, Dontavian Wicks. He's also got a couple of nice tight ends in Luke Musgrave and Tucker Kraft. What do we do here? Well, let's take a look at their keep trade cut values to start with. Jordan Love's at QB 10, jumped up from being almost lost for dead the previous couple seasons where Aaron Rodgers stepped up and had an MVP campaign. You could get Jordan Love for basically free. Now it's a pretty penny for the gentleman. And he is moving up the boards quickly. He's basically a round two startup pick right now. I've seen him go as high as the back end of round one. Um, it's arguable. I mean, personally, I'd rather have Jordan Love than Caleb Williams right now. So one could easily argue to take him right there in the back half of the first round. Now, one main reason for that is just the youth sitting there in his talent-filled wide receiver room. I mean, we've got Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Romeo Dobbs, and Dontavian Wicks. Now, they're all basically available for around a second round pick right now. So, what does that mean? Who should we grab? Well, Christian Watson is at wide receiver 41 on keep trade cut. Jaden Reed at 31. Romeo Dobbs at wide receiver 50. And Dontavian Wicks at 52. So, just who is the best value here? Well, personally, I would say the best value has got to be the number one guy when he's healthy, and that would be Christian Watson. Watson puts up huge target numbers when healthy. He is the very immediate deep threat for Jordan Love. Now, Love showed that he can play without Christian Watson in the lineup, but that's when you saw the spike in numbers for Jaden Reed. So is Jaden Reed really truly should he be valued at wide receiver 31? That's the big question. Now, a lot of podcasts out there have told you to be going and selling Jaden Reed at this current value. I don't necessarily say you have to sell him, but I do highly doubt him moving up anywhere past, like I could see him getting up to maybe the wide receiver 25, even 20 range if he does see an increase in snap share. But honestly, when Christian Watson was healthy, Jaden Reed only saw a 52% snap share last year. So uh, I mean, it's really hard while to see that while Christian Watson is healthy, that you will see huge numbers from Jaden Reed. He's very touchdown dependent. He scored a lot of touchdowns last season. May see a few increases in touches otherwise, but as long as Watson is healthy, he is the go-to guy. So I also like Romeo Dobbs as a undervalued player. Dobbs was a finished wide receiver 36 in most half PPR, full PPR formats last season. So Dobbs being at wide receiver 50, I do see as a value. Now, the one receiver that I actually love as the most all around talented receiver is Dontavian Wicks. So the fact is, I'm probably buying three of these wide receivers now, and I'd just be holding on Jaden Reed. I mean, unless you're getting a first rounder and you have plenty of talent in your wide receiver rooms, I'm talking like 7 or 8 wide receivers that you could start each and every week. If you have 7 or 8 wide receivers that are threshold or above, I'm talking like the bottom end of that for me would be like Jacoby Myers, Brandon Cooks. That bottom end would be the threshold right there. Romeo Dobbs, you could throw into that. If you have 7 or 8 receivers like that, I would definitely look to maybe kick the tires on sending out Jaden Reed for a first rounder. Other than that, though, if you can buy Christian Watson for a second rounder and you need wide receivers, I would go ahead and go out and do that because when Christian Watson is healthy, so especially for like a best ball format, I think he'd be a great buy for a second rounder if you could get him for that. I'm sure the owner knows Christian Watson's talent. That's probably why he drafted him where he did. So it might be a difficult buy for just a second. You might have to add a little sweetener on top of that, but go ahead and check out in your leagues before the hype starts in the preseason, because once the preseason starts, it will be more readily available and known that he is actually still the wide receiver one for the Packers. So I would go ahead and, as far as the Packers are concerned, I do expect a healthy Christian Watson to be the top dog for the Packers this season. Now, for tight ends, Tucker Kraft has an injury right now, and he might not be ready until the very end of preseason or even the end of September, possibly. So it's very likely that Luke Musgrave will be getting a ton of the tight end snaps here for the Packers. So I would go out and kick the tires on Musgrave as well, because even last season, going into the season, Musgrave was definitely the tight end one. Remember, both of these guys were drafted in the 2023 draft by the Packers. So it was kind of a situation similar to like Hayden Hurst and Mark Andrews when they were both taken by the Baltimore Ravens, where you had two very good rookie tight ends. And last year, both of these tight ends showed flashes. Tucker Kraft took over the tight end room when Musgrave went down for an injury last season and produced very well. And so it was looking like it could be Kraft's room. Then Musgrave came back in the playoffs and he had a couple of good games. So I think Musgrave has taken the room back and he will be the tight end one. Uh, so if you could go out and get Musgrave for, I'd say a second rounder is viable for him. I'd go ahead and look at that option. Now, that's if you really need a tight end. I don't like going out and buying tight ends necessarily unless you really need them. It's not a position I totally prioritize unless you're talking a full PPR, a full tight end premium bonus or a start two tight end league. That's where you really need extra tight end bodies. But otherwise, I like to really slim it down in tight end and look more for backup running backs on my rosters in lineup leagues. So that's where I'm at with the Green Bay Packers crowded wide receiver room. Let's move on to the Kansas City Chiefs, where they've had a wild off season, beginning with the uh, off the field exploits of Rashee Rice, who had a blow up rookie season, dominated the second half of last season with especially with the increased volume of wide receiver screens that helped his numbers. Uh, Ironically, his ADOT was super low, so I don't see him as big of a downfield threat as some may envision him as when he was first drafted. Um, but nonetheless, Rashee Rice definitely had his role. And from what I've heard from the offseason incidents, uh, he he really, I mean, to be honest, I think maybe 2 or 3 games tops is what he's looking at as far as a suspension goes. Um, so I would buy Rashee Rice if you could still get him for like a second rounder. It doesn't seem like the Chiefs or the NFL are all that concerned about the off the field incidents from Rashee Rice. Now, they did go out and sign Hollywood Brown to a 1 year, I believe it was an $11 million deal. So they bring in Hollywood. They also drafted Xavier Worthy, who had, of course, the fastest combine time ever. So tons of speed here now with the Chiefs. Plenty of weapons to go along with Travis Kelce there for Mr. Patrick Mahomes, one of the top quarterbacks, if not the top quarterback. You can argue him or Josh Allen as the QB1 in Dynasty right now. And it looks like Mr. Mahomes will be slinging it more this year, probably will be able to improve on his numbers that were, of course, down last season, especially for those in redraft leagues. They know how much it pained them to have Patrick Mahomes on their roster. So, again, I would probably still try and kick the tires on Rashee Rice for a second rounder. Hollywood Brown, not buying him for a first, but I would take him for a second. That's for sure. And it's there that you had to draft at the back end of the first round. Some people had him. I mean, I even saw him go ahead at Roma Dunze in a league or two, which I thought was nonsense. But, you know, some people just can't help themselves. Anybody that gets shafted by the Chiefs, whether it goes back to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, uh, who do we got? The guy from Western Michigan, Sky Moore. I mean, that was only a couple of years ago, and I barely can remember the guy's name. That's how crazy people are, though, when a guy gets drafted by the Chiefs. Just having Patrick Mahomes attached to their name brings up the value. You have artificial value there. So, again, if you have Hollywood Brown and you are flush at wide receiver, I'm talking 7, 8 wide receivers, good, solid receivers that you could start every week. I would look to dish Hollywood Brown off your roster right now. He's only got a 1 year contract. Personally, I see him putting up numbers similar to what you saw from Juju Smith-Schuster, which was, to put it bluntly, pretty underwhelming. All right. I know a lot of us were excited about Juju and his time with Kansas City, but then it just never really panned out for the good. And with this room being crowded, I don't expect Rice to miss much time. You could hold on to Hollywood to see if you could maybe get a first for him after the first or second week, and he has a great week, especially if he has a good game in the opening night game. That sets a lot of people's mind where their values are for players. Whenever somebody does great in a week one game, that value tends to hold over for a few weeks, at least till the end of September. Somebody could have a great, my point is somebody could have a great week one, stink it up for the next 2 weeks, but people still have that mentally engraved in their heads about how they did in week one, whether it's waiver wire pickups or it's these borderline threshold receivers. If they have a great week in week one, people will buy into them. It's different if they struggle week one and then have a good week two, then people aren't buying into them as much. It's just funny how people's minds work, but I'm telling you, that's how the game is played. So we all know Travis Kelce is 34 years old, but we all know that he is still Patrick Mahomes' favorite target. So as long as Kelce is playing, I still see him as an asset that it's definitely worth owning and you can win with. So Travis Kelce, if you can get him for cheap, I mean, if you can get Travis Kelce for a second rounder, go ahead and do it. If you're struggling and you're sitting on like a Dallas Goedert or a very middling, mediocre tight end room, maybe kick the tires on Travis Kelce. If you've got extra picks, doesn't hurt to have him in your lineups. Next, we'll move on to one of the major title contenders to take away that trophy from the Chiefs. As we all know, we've never seen any team three-peat in the Lombardi Trophy era. And so there's just too many good teams in the NFL. I just don't see it happening for the Chiefs. They've undergone some issues in the offseason now with Rashee Rice, though it's not really that big of a deal. Again, there's just a lot of good teams in the NFL. The San Francisco 49ers are probably the top contender, I would see, especially after watching the receivers show on Netflix. Man, I'm telling you, seeing George Kittle and Deebo Samuel both on that show, and it just makes me realize how good the San Francisco 49ers actually are. I mean, they didn't even have to talk about Christian McCaffrey, and you could just see how good that offense really is when it's humming. And so this room obviously is crowded. It was a crowded room before they drafted Ricky Pearsall in the first round. Now, a lot of us saw that, immediately went to, oh, Debo or Ayuk is going to get traded. Well, that hasn't happened yet. And to be honest, there's really no reason for the 49ers to do something like that. Debo has had his injury issues. He's got hamstrings that are just basically really tightly wound. And so it's almost inevitable every year you're going to see a 2, 3, 4 week absence from Debo. But when he's on the field, the guy is electric and he can score 2, 3 touchdowns any given week. I mean, just check out the show, man. I'm telling you, you're gonna end up falling in love with Debo. He's just a big teddy bear with his kid and everything. I don't know. But that also means that because the show is readily available to everyone on Netflix, that if you do own Debo, he wouldn't be a bad guy to maybe dish off. If you've got him, and again, you have a crowded wide receiver room of your own, Debo wouldn't be a bad option to deal away. Debo is now 26, going on 27, and so he's getting a little older, and so he might be in his last season with the Niners. If he doesn't get dealt this season, which I personally don't think will happen, but if he doesn't get dealt this season, expect either him or Ayuk to be gone next off season. They didn't draft Ricky Pearsall in the first round to not eventually give him a shot as a top dog there to get targets. All right. They've got Pearsall here for good insurance for this 24 season. But I do expect Pearsall to be a major weapon for them in 2025 and beyond. All right. So he's going to be someone that's a prime trade for target next off season. So if you can get him for a second rounder right now, wouldn't be a bad idea to do that if you have extra seconds laying around. And you're a little sketchy in the wide receiver room, maybe you're rebuilding, Pearsall would be a good target. Maybe somebody drafted Pearsall and is having a little remorse for doing so. It's possible. Okay. But moving on to Brandon Ayuk, this guy's a stud, and he proved it last season. He had just super efficiency in his targets. The guy only had 105 targets and had over 1,300 yards. I mean, that's insane production. And Brock Purdy has got the system down. They have Christian McCaffrey in the backfield locked up for the next 3 seasons. So I don't see any reason. They've got Trent Williams as one of the best tackles, if not the best tackle still in the league. So that offensive line is solid. This offense is just humming when it's healthy. And so I don't see any way that the Niners are not one of the top two teams in the NFC this season. And so when it's sometimes when something is so good and it's just like right there in front of our faces, it's hard to see, or it's just like, yeah, they're really good, but I want to find the next good thing, right? That's what we're all kind of looking for when we're in startups, and we're like, oh yeah, the Niners are really good. We know that, but let me try. I want to get somebody else. It's the fact is Purdy's going to put up numbers. Like he's on a good offense, good team, probably the best play caller in the league, and I mean they're just a really good offense, and sometimes it's just so easy to overlook that, and we don't see what's like literally right in front of our faces there. Christian McCaffrey goes 101, you know, all of the redraft leagues this year. He's going to go 101 in 99% of your leagues, unless you got some crazy wide receiver scoring league where CD could go number one. I can understand that then. But otherwise, McCaffrey is going first overall in all redrafts. It doesn't matter that it's guy's 28 years old. He's still odds on favorite to be the top running back, top non-quarterback point scorer, just about all formats. So when we're looking at this wide receiver room, I haven't even mentioned George Kittle yet. And if you watch this show, you're gonna fall in love with George Kittle, no matter what you think of him going into seeing that. The guy is just pure entertainment. All right, he was made for this show. I'm telling you. And again, the guy is just an animal blocking. He sets up Debo Samuel for all those jet sweeps. It's always Kittle there is the guy setting those and making those holes for him. The guy is just amazing. And then as far as Kittle's production goes, we all know it comes and goes in spurts. But in lineup leagues, if you've got him, you basically have to put him in there. If it's a best ball league, well, then you're going to get those spike weeks from him, and they're going to be awesome. So Kittle's a nice, decent veteran buy. Again, you could probably get him for a second rounder, and it wouldn't be a bad idea to kick the tires on him either if you're looking and shopping for a veteran tight end. I mean, anybody in the Kelsey, Kittle, and Evan Ingram range there, I'd be happy with any of those three dudes. Okay. Next up, we are going to move on to the Seattle Seahawks. Now, the Seahawks went ahead and drafted Jackson Smith and Jigba, as we all know, in the first round last season to sort of be the eventual replacement for Tyler Lockett. Still have DK Metcalf on the outside as the true number one alpha there, but many see Jackson Smith and Jigba as the eventual replacement for Tyler Lockett, which is inevitable. Lockett's 31 years old now, but he's just that old man that won't die. And Lockett still will get his targets. Lockett right now is wide receiver 76 on Keep Trade Cut. I mean, this guy still had some production last season, and he's going to probably be another, a top 50 wide receiver again. And it doesn't hurt that Pete Carroll finally is gone and out of Seattle, brought in Mike McDonald, the new head coach in Seattle from Baltimore. He's a defensive minded guy. He was the defensive coordinator there, but they brought in the offensive coordinator from the University of Washington. And check this out. These are some very crazy numbers. So Seattle, even though Pete Carroll was there, he led them to, they actually had a 60-40 split in passing to running ratio last season. So most of the people would think that Pete Carroll had like more closer to a 50-50 split. Well, he actually had a 60-40 pass to run ratio last season. However, the Seahawks are one of the slowest paced teams in the league. They only ran 56 plays per game, okay, which was 957 total plays in a 17-game season, right? The University of Washington, as we all know, Michael Penix was running the show. They had Roma Dunze, Jalen McMillan, Jalen Polk there. They were slinging it around, and that was to the tune of 985 total plays or 66 plays per game. Super fast pace, slinging it downfield. They had their tight end being mentioned as a possible NFL draft pick, and he was a nobody. And so what I'm getting at is the University of Washington literally ran more plays last season in 15 games than the Seahawks did in 17 games. And they had 10 extra plays per game. Now, I don't expect Seattle to all of a sudden jump up to 66 plays per game. That would be tops in the NFL. But if they go up to, say, even cut that in half and go up to 61, maybe 62 plays per game, that's six extra plays per game means about 4 extra pass attempts per game. That's just taking it lightly. All right. So if they have 4 extra passes per game, that's going to be an extra target per game for all of these receivers, and probably Noah Fant included into that, who I like at tight end 26. He's a great buy this offseason, great late round pick in a startup. And Noah Fant, somebody I've been trying to acquire all off season, just about all formats. Then you go to the wide receivers, and I love DK, always have, but I don't see any way his numbers go down at all this year. JSN sitting at wide receiver 26. You could go either way on him. I'm not all in on JSN yet. I don't know if he's going to. What I could see from JSN is something that's happened in Tampa where Chris Godwin had one big blow up season where he was wide receiver 2 on the year and hasn't quite reached that status since then, but he's become a solid, consistent wide receiver 2 for everybody who's owned him in Dynasty since then. And that's kind of what I see from JSN forthcoming in the future, the next 2-3 seasons. I could see 1 year maybe where JSN just puts up a monster, an insane amount of targets out of the slot, but then sort of settles into the top 30 at the wide receiver position. So I do see him as a good buy for your future wide receiver room, as long as you're not paying too much. I don't know that I love paying paying a straight up first. If you're a like, let's say you were one of the first or second place teams in your league last season, and so you have a really good idea that you're going to be a playoff team and you could see your 25 first as a late first. I don't like doing that necessarily, like projecting and being so overconfident in your team. As we all know, this is still fantasy football. And like, if you have somebody like Christian McCaffrey on your roster, well, if he goes down, your fortunes in your fantasy playoffs will go down with them, most likely. So that could make your first round pick a mid pick then. And so then you're looking at one of the better receivers next season in the draft. There's probably right now there's projected probably 3 or 4 wide receivers that would go in the first round of rookie drafts. So you'd still be looking at a pretty good body. But again, if you're buying JSN right now, you're buying him for the 24 season. Some rookie wide receiver that you would pick next year in the draft, well, you're not going to get any production from him until the 2025 season. So if you've had, like maybe say you have a Keenan Allen on your roster, right? It wouldn't be a bad idea to package something with Keenan Allen to jump up to the JSN type receiver. I actually see JSN and Keenan Allen as pretty similar type receivers. And so I do think that JSN does have maybe one top 10 season in him. I could see that. But again, I'm not overly buying into him. Um, we kind of have to see it happen on the field. I don't see JSN as a Rashad Bateman, where he's just going to fall off the map, basically. But I do want to see it from JSN. His price right now at wide receiver 26 is probably properly placed, and so he's not a bad guy to grab in like the sixth round of our dynasty startups right now, and he also isn't a bad buy either. All right. Next up, we have, of course, the Houston Texans. Now, these guys obviously crowded their wide receiver room up by going out and acquiring Stephon Diggs this offseason. It just solidified CJ Stroud's value. It insulated it greatly, and everybody's been all over him. I mean, his value shot up to quarterback 3. So there's no more buying CJ Stroud at a discount. If you didn't get him during last season, you're going to have a tough time buying him now. If you're buying him now, you are probably overpaying. You're ending up sending somebody like Jordan Love plus a first. And to me, that's just ridiculous because Jordan Love honestly could produce just as well as CJ Stroud this season. So, and going forward as well. It's just not a good buy right now in CJ Stroud. There's no scenario to me where I see him as a great buy unless you're extravagantly improving, like let's say you're going from Baker Mayfield up to CJ Stroud. So you're adding something to Baker to get up to CJ Stroud, or you're adding something to like Kirk Cousins jumping up to, because then you're jumping up like 2 tiers. What I'm talking about not doing is trading like any of the Justin Herberts, Kyler Murray, Trevor Lawrence is definitely not Jordan Love. Any of those guys in that range where there's still a lot of youth and the potential to easily be a top 10 quarterback, that's not somebody I want to add to go up to CJ Stroud. All right. CJ Stroud just doesn't have the rushing upside for me to believe that he could ever be a QB1 in a particular season. Could he have a monster quarterback number season where he throws for over 5,000 yards and 50 touchdowns? I guess it's possible, but the thing is that Stephon Diggs only has a 1-year deal here. All right, we don't know where he's going to be in the 25 season. There's no guarantee that he comes back to Houston. So then you're just left with Tank Dell and Nico Collins. And honestly, I mean, go back to this time last year. Where were Nico Collins and Tank Dell ranked? Okay, they were both outside the top 30 for sure at wide receiver. And so now all of a sudden, we're pumping both of them up inside the top 30. Nico Collins is all the way up to wide receiver 17. Tank Dell's now wide receiver 20. Okay. I don't think that Tank Dell is a bad buy. I've seen a couple of deals recently where people down tiered from Jalen Waddle, maybe Brandon Ayuk, down to Tank Dell plus something. I like that kind of deal. Okay. Because I think Tank Dell, when healthy, can produce like the players in the tier above him. And so if you get a full, 16, 17 game season out of Tank Dell, you're going to see monster numbers. I mean, he was on pace for like, what was it, 90 catches and over 1,300 yards last season if he had played the whole year. So I do think that Tank Dell will be still given the most targets in the Texans offense. I think that Stephon Diggs is going to take on a role similar to what like Antonio Brown was for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when he jumped in to a wide receiver room that already had Mike Evans, already had Chris Godwin. I think it's a similar situation where you have a Nico Collins that's kind of like Mike Evans, and then Tank Dell is sort of like the Chris Godwin underneath guy, and Stephon Diggs is just going to get the catches when he can. He may have flashes. So in best ball, you'll get 2 or 3 spike weeks out of Stephon Diggs. But honestly, full season, if he plays 15 or more games, I think you're looking at more like 800 yards and 5 to 6 touchdowns. All right. Now, if you have a blow up monster type season from CJ Stroud where he does throw for 50 touchdowns, well, then of course, all of these guys are going to have great seasons. Now, does CJ Stroud do that, or do I want to put my money on something like that happening? Absolutely not. That's too crazy of an outlier. Okay. Problem for some people is that they're buying into something like that actually happening. Okay. Do I think the Houston Texans are a contender this year? Absolutely. Okay. They could win their division. They could meet the Chiefs in the AFC Championship. All right. But they still have to overcome the Chiefs in order for CJ Stroud to have any way of surpassing Mahomes or Josh Allen in dynasty rankings. There's just my point is there's no room for him to grow right now. Okay. I I think he'll be a top 10 quarterback? Sure. Is he going to be top 5? No guarantee on that. Not without that rushing upside like Anthony Richardson has, Lamar Jackson has, Kyler Murray has. There's just it's I mean, Jaden Daniels could outscore CJ Stroud this year. All right. That rushing upside is huge in fantasy football. Josh Allen, of course, has it. So does Jalen Hurts. I mean, the list goes on and on with rushing quarterbacks who have top 10 potential and top 5, more importantly, potential every season. So I do like CJ Stroud, the player. Don't love CJ Stroud, the dynasty asset. Okay. And moving on then to our final team, we come to the rookie run Chicago Bears, and that will be Caleb Williams' offense this season. Don't think we've had a rookie quarterback walk into a wide receiver room like this since Matt Leinart fell into the Arizona Cardinals laps. And they had Larry Fitzgerald, Anquan Bolden, and I believe it was John Brown there. Um, they had a monster wide receiver stable there. And that's what Caleb Williams is walking into here with probably future Hall of Famer Keenan Allen. You got DJ Moore coming off a monster season, and then adding the uber talented Roma Dunze, who could end up being the top wide receiver of this class. Now, that's saying a lot with Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors both in it, but I do think Roma Dunze has the talent to potentially be that. Now, will he do that and show that his rookie season? Hard to say. Definitely hard to do with Keenan Allen and DJ Moore both in the room as well with him. I think that's likely to happen very late in this season and probably going into next season. You'd be looking at something like that where Roma Dunze is officially crowned the top wide receiver for the Bears, but it's definitely in the cards for him. And so right now we have DJ Moore at wide receiver 21, Keenan Allen down at wide receiver 53, of course, due to his age, and Roma Dunze at wide receiver 14. So Roma Dunze, people have already bought into him, having him ranked at wide receiver 14. He's not a sell for me. If you drafted Roma Dunze, you drafted him because you needed some youth in your wide receiver room, and he could start producing as immediately as week 1. So he's not somebody that I'm looking to deal away. But if you're excited about him, I would look to buy into him now rather than wait, because this is football, and one of these 3 dudes is going to get hurt at some point. I mean, Keenan Allen, I can't remember the last time he's played a full season. He produces when he's playing, but is he going to have a full season? Probably not. And so that's when Roma Dunze could look to increase his target share. And then by the end of this season, he could definitely be the top dog. DJ Moore is sneaky. He's still there in the room, but I don't see him putting up another 1,400 yard season. Again, I'm dropping his projections down to maybe like 1,100 yards. He's sitting there at wide receiver 21. I think that's a decent projection for him. But again, remember, they have a rookie quarterback. And I don't like saying just because he's with the Bears and the Bears have never had a 4,000 yard passer, then it won't happen. But again, this is a rookie quarterback, and rookie quarterbacks, for one, they've never had 3 wide receivers go over 1,000 yards. Rookie quarterbacks found it difficult to have two wide receivers go over 1,000 yards. Okay. Caleb Williams could have sort of what I liken him to is like a Jameis Winston type rookie season. Okay. Remember Jameis Winston, how hyped he was coming out of Florida State. And a lot of that hype was based off of what had happened a couple of years previous to his final season at Florida State. So a lot of the similarities with Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams had his Heisman season a couple of seasons ago, then he kind of had a down season. And that's what happened with Winston. And those we saw those bad instincts and bad things that people talked about going into the draft. Those all started to pop up, and the warts definitely shown. He didn't get re-signed in Tampa, and now he's become sort of a journeyman. And a lot of people aren't bought into Caleb Williams, and I'm definitely a doubter myself. As of right now, I don't have any shares of Caleb Williams, and I'm not actively going out and pursuing it. I love Jaden Daniels' upside with his rushing ability, so I do have a share of him. And in redraft, if I'm looking between the two of Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams, I'm taking Jaden Daniels ahead of him. Um, Rookie quarterbacks tend to have to use their legs more. They aren't as quick reading, going through the projections. So they take a look at the first, maybe the second read, and then they take off before they get sacked. So they're not as apt to, dump off to the running backs. So I think that their running backs won't get as many receptions. So that would go down to like Roshan Johnson and DeAndre Swift. Definitely, I don't think we'll get as many receptions as people may have forecasted for them. But do I think that Caleb can get to 4,000 yards? Yes, it's possible. Okay. But is he going to lead the Bears to the playoffs this first season? Who knows? I mean, it's a very tough division that they're in, probably the best division in the NFC right now, top to bottom. And so it's going to be a tough road for the Bears, especially to overcome the Packers and the Lions. I think that the Bears could finish similar to where the Vikings are going to finish this season. But, a lot's to be said about what the Vikings have there in the quarterback room with Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy, the heir apparent there. And so it'll be an interesting year in the NFC North. Um, as far as this room goes, am I buying into any of them? Again, Roma Dunze would be the one that I do like going forward for the 2025 season and beyond. But as far as right now, it's hard for me to buy into any of these receivers in the Bears wide receiver stable. And Cole Kmet, fortunately, I think that he's going to be the one that definitely sees a drop in production. And so a lot of people have this myth that rookie quarterbacks love just dumping off to the tight end. Well, again, rookie quarterbacks have trouble processing the speed of the NFL. And so they do their first and second reads and then they tend to take off. And so a tight end usually is not the number one option or either the number two option. So that leaves the dump offs are the one that sort of take a hit when you're talking rookie quarterbacks. It's the veteran quarterbacks that dump off to their tight ends. It's the veteran quarterbacks that dump off to their running backs. All right. So I've always seen that as a myth. The rookie quarterbacks love their tight ends. I don't know where that started, but if you can show me in the chat some proof of that, I would love to see it. Okay. Anyway, that's all I've got for you for wide receiver rooms. We're almost to 45 minutes here, so I just want to remind you, if you haven't smashed the like and subscribed, please do so. Please check out our Patreon. Again, it's the Birdhouse Dynasty Show over on Patreon. We want to thank Choice Sports Cards for sponsoring us. Check them out over on Whatnot. Kyle and the boys do a great job selling and buying your sports cards for you. That's a great show. They love doing that. And you will too if you check them out. So once again, thanks for joining us tonight. And as always, never stop working.